Okay, got interrupted by something. So we're just going to continue from the last video. So we're talking about the land and who owns it and who's the occupier, blah, blah. So we got to the point of Yom Kippur War 1967 and why Israel took the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. So on these maps it says that basically it's again false. It's saying the Gaza Strip and the West Bank were self-governed. Well, no, they're not. So the Gaza Strip isn't self-governed by Palestinians until Israel decided to give it to the Palestinians about 20 years ago, just shy of 20 years ago, I think. And that's not on any of these maps. And then the present day, they have the issue of Jewish settlers in the West Bank. And I think that's probably the most complex of anything we can discuss. But it's funny because the self-governed land, according to these pro-Palestinian maps, becomes less in the West Bank, but they're not self-governing it before. So actually, the actual truth from a different perspective is certainly true. And maybe you could say, if you, on balance, looked at it, the probability is for most people, the opposite is true. That the Palestinians have no land, and then over time they get more and more land. So that there's more land in the present day that's self-governed by Palestinians in the West Bank than there was before Yom Kippur, and in the immediate time after Yom Kippur. I think, I mean, this is leading this conversation in a different direction. I think the reality to me is Israel govern the actual land with the people and the issues fairly well. I think the big thing is the West Bank and who owns it and stuff, and you get to the UN and different things. And that probably for me is the most complex thing to discuss politically, as in who owns it. But again, going back to the other partition plans, there is no perfect answer. I'm not saying this is right or wrong either. I would say personally, from my perspective, it's right, but I'm not saying generally that it would be right for most people. It depends on your perspectives. But part of the Jewish mindset of the West Bank is if you put your own people settling in that land, you protect yourself inside that land. So that's kind of the whole thing. So if you conclude the whole argument about it, so the maps are completely false about who owns the land, who controls it, who's in the land, who occupies it, who should have control, whose land it is, who's the occupier. So if you step back and then say, okay, let's not repeat what we said before, because it's a lot of things to start off with. It's just going to get complicated. But the first thing you say without any hesitation in your head is this idea of settler, occupier, who owns the land, whose lands have been stolen, is far more complicated. And if you honestly assess it, it's highly complicated because you have to go back to a particular time. And either side can go back to a particular time and show you the land that was stolen from them and why it's rightly theirs. And that's the problem you have. So overall, I think the point I'm trying to get across is this whole pro-Palestinian, that particularly the protesters that come out and protest and say it's stolen land, and you've got genocide. So I think it's pretty clear in my mind there is no genocide being carried out on the Gaza Strip. What's being carried out is a military operation, and unfortunately that's what happens in war. I mean, we'll probably go on and look at some further stats, so I guess some of what I'm saying is slightly contentious, but like there is no winner. What we said is with the moral dilemma is you can't have your cake and eat it. Basically, you pick a side. So pick a side. So if you pick the Palestinians, they're being killed by genocidal maniacs and having genocide committed on them unfairly. Pick the Israel side, and that's their mindset of what will happen unless they defend themselves. Someone, as we said, has got to step in and do something about that. But certainly, all the arguments that the pro-Palestinian groups make, so again, the far left politically, let's just stick to the far left politically, it's like they are pretty much fools. They are certainly one-sided. They're not balanced. If you balance this out, this gets a whole lot more complicated than that's the first thing. It's a whole lot more complicated than any side says. And it comes down to religion and whose God is right and whose God is wrong, I think, at the end of the day. As a Christian, I'd stick with the Israeli side because the Bible, obviously, most of it is the Tanakh and the Torah, what we call the Old Testament. And I don't believe Allah is God. So there you go. That kind of decides it, really, I think. It's basically a religious war. And there's some stuff we'll go over in further videos about that. But what we've been presented isn't a balanced opinion. I think the evidence would suggest the Israeli mindset is right. The Palestinians will, given the opportunity and the help from the other nations who want to wipe Israel off the map, actually wipe Israel off the map. So it's like, well, what do you do about either argument? The only thing you can't do is you can't have them live in peace, because effectively you can't get both sides to live in peace or whatever. That's just never going to happen. You either believe the other side's going to wipe the other out, or the one side's going to wipe the other out. It's never ever going to get to a place where we can have a two-state solution. So let's stop talking gibberish about a two-state solution. So I think, given the whole argument, my final comments would be on the argument that the Palestinians make, and this is the problem. And this is the problem with everything in kind of Western society at the moment, and the way we think about things. It's like, when we get confused by ideas carried by ideologues who will never change their position, and I think that we embrace ourselves into complex issues that need solving, but then can't be solved because people won't look at other people's side of their story and won't discuss and won't have a discussion, let alone an argument. They just want to stick it to whoever and tell them how it is, which isn't the way it is. So I think that's the problem, and I'll discuss this in the final video.